So, all right. Well, let's get started. It is 6 o'clock. Can you guys see the slides? It's not a whole lot on the slides. I just kind of basically have that there so people can see the studies that we're going to reference. But I think this is such an important topic. We talked about this briefly on the supplement discussion about the placebo and belief effects. Over the course of my career, I used to start to think that like exercise was the most important. Then it was nutrition, then it was sleep. Now I think it's mindset. And really, everything flows downhill from your mindset. And I think it's very important for people to know how powerful our thoughts and our beliefs are because they can determine so much of our physiology. We know, for example, stress. We know that psychosocial stress, meaning, the jerk that cuts you off in traffic or your boss that you don't like, actually increase your stress markers, like biological stress markers, cytokines. So this is stuff that's very important and stuff that's downplayed, but I'm going to highlight some really cool studies that I think are cool that outline the placebo effect and the belief effect. So briefly, the placebo effect is basically when you do an intervention and then you see positive effects from that intervention, even though that intervention may be inert. So when we give placebo versus a drug, the placebo has no active ingredients in it. It's like a sugar pill. We see benefit in a lot of studies for whatever condition you're studying in the placebo group. And so it's doing an inert intervention, but it's the belief that that intervention will improve XYZ, and you see some improvement. And then the belief effect is what someone believes about their therapy, and that has an effect. And there's actually something called the nocebo effect. It's kind of the opposite of the placebo effect. It's where you believe an inert intervention will harm you, and it actually leads to harm. And we're seeing this a lot, we think, with statins, because statin drugs have gotten a lot of negative publicity and the side effects of them have been amplified, even though those anecdotal reports are not lining up with the frequency and what we're seeing in the clinical trials. So we're thinking that a lot of that is a nocebo effect, where people now believe that statins are harmful and they start taking them and they experience harm. So this is how powerful this stuff is. This is why you need randomized controlled trials, because the placebo effect is so powerful. Like if you don't test it against placebo, you have no idea if you're actually getting an effect from that intervention. And, if something is low cost or low risk of harm and it's providing placebo effect, then it might be okay. Like, for example, the bracelets with the negative ions, right? Those were really popular a couple of years ago. I still see evidence supports that it's just placebo effect. But I'm like, okay, well, it may be placebo effect, but those things are cheap and they're not really going to cause any harm. So probably it's a net benefit. If you're experiencing, you get some placebo effect from it, it's not costing you much, it's not going to harm you, then I think it's a net benefit, right? But not everything that has placebo effect is net benefit if it can cause harms or if it is extremely costly. Okay, so let's move on to our first study. This study was really cool. What they did was they looked at hotel maids and they found this group of maids. There was 84 maids in the study. And what they did was they did some surveys on these maids beforehand. They asked them, how much exercise do you guys do? And they reported, we don't do much exercise. And so they split the study group into two groups. They had a control group where they just got some info about healthy behaviors. And then they had the intervention group, which was the placebo group, where they informed them that good exercise is actually your job, like cleaning. You're moving stuff all day. You're on your feet all day. You're walking around all day. This is actually pretty good exercise you're getting at your job. Then they followed them for 4 weeks. And what they found was at the end of that 4 weeks, there was no change in diet or exercise outside of work for these two groups. But the intervention group, the group that they just told them that their work is good exercise. They saw that group, they lost weight on average. They decreased their blood pressure on average. They lost body fat on average. They improved their waist to hip ratio. They improved their body mass index after 4 weeks. That's incredible to me, that just telling someone, hey, do you realize what you're doing is actually beneficial for you? And then there was no change in the other stuff that we typically associate with these improvements in blood pressure and body measurements. Anthropomorphics is what we call them, just by being told that what you're doing is actually really good for this, without any change in diet or any change in exercise. That's the power of the placebo effect. So let's go on to our next study here. This one I thought was a really cool study too. A lot of this is done from Dr. Crumb's lab. And this one, they had a milkshake experiment. You'll hear this called like the milkshake study. This was a crossover study. So what they did was they had people do two things. They had them consume a milkshake, and then they measured blood levels of a hormone called ghrelin. Ghrelin called in medical school ghrelin, because ghrelin is associated with increased appetite. And so what happens with ghrelin is ghrelin goes up and you start to feel hungry. So ghrelin is released in response to things like, lower blood sugar or need for food intake. And so what happens is after we eat, the ghrelin levels have peaked to get us to eat. And then after we eat, ghrelin kind of levels and then it comes down. And then after a while, again, once it's time to re-up on some nutrients, you start to feel hungry and ghrelin goes up. So they measured that, and they measured satiety, like how full did you feel after this milkshake? And so they had one group, they told them that the milkshake was a indulgent milkshake and that it was a 620 calorie shake. The other group, they told it was a sensible calorie shake and they only had 140 calories. The truth of the matter is that the shake actually had 380 calories. The group, when they were told that it was an indulgent milkshake, what happened was their ghrelin levels dropped off soon. So you actually saw a change in their physiology based upon what they were told about the milkshake, not the actual constituents of the milkshake. So the indulgent shake saw a steeper decline in the ghrelin levels. The sensible shake was pretty much flat compared to normal. So you didn't see a decline in ghrelin. And then they were checked on satiety, and what they reported was consistent with what they believed they got. So the people who got the indulgent milkshake said they felt more full. They felt more satiated afterward. The people who got the sensible milkshake said that they didn't feel as full, that they didn't feel as satiated afterwards. And again, the milkshake was the same calorie amount. It's just what were they told about the milkshake? That's another example of a belief effect. What you believe about a therapy or intervention can dictate the outcomes and the magnitude of outcomes about that intervention. So I have a friend who, when I had my podcast, I interviewed him. He has a holistic practice here in Houston, and he works with oncologists and does some holistic therapies revolving around oncology. And I asked him about it, and I said, what makes the biggest difference in these patients? And he said, looking at the data that we have, the biggest difference is, do they form a new identity around the belief that they can heal themselves? He said, out of all the things that we've seen, crunching all the data, that's the number one thing that we've seen makes a difference in people's therapy. Like, do they believe that they can beat the cancer, that they can go through the therapy, that they can deal with the hardship? Do they form a new identity around that? And I thought that was super powerful, because that is a belief effect. Okay. This study was another study looking at the placebo effect. And I think this one is also super interesting as someone who works out. And so this was another crossover trial. And the intervention was they had three different things. They had three different beverages. They had one that was pink color. They had one that was transparent, and then they had no drink. And they had these people lift. They had them do 5 sets at 79% of their 1 rep maximum with 2 minutes rest before each set. And this was in 18 people who are been strength training. So these were what we call trained individuals. And so what they did was they found that when they ingested the pink drink, actually increased the amount of reps they did by 4 reps. And then when the transparent drink, there was no increase in reps, and there was actually no difference between the transparent drink and the no drink. And what was interesting is that they actually did more work, harder work in the pinks when they did the pink drink. Yet there was no difference in motivation. There was no difference in arousal effect, perceived exertion. So they did more work. They didn't feel like they did more work, all because they got a pink colored drink. And so why is that? Well, I hypothesized that the pink color is associated with sweetness. So you're thinking that there may be more carbohydrates in there. Pink color is also typically associated with pre-workout. So there's this belief here that this pink color drink is something that's going to augment your workout. Even though that was the only difference, that one was pink, one was transparent, and then there was no drink. When I tell people about the study, they're like, 4 reps, that doesn't seem like much. I'm like, 4 additional reps at 80% of your 1 rep maximum is tremendously impactful. That is a huge difference in the amount of weight that was lifted, right? This is something that I think is pretty incredible, because this is actually real world examples of something tangible and something that a lot of people do, where mindset is effective, where most people don't think that mindset is important when it comes to lifting weights. But we know, those of us who do it regularly, and those of us who have done it at a high level, that the mindset is everything in this regard. Okay. So this was another really interesting study. This one was about genetic risk, and if you think you have a certain genetic risk, does that actually impact like markers of physiology? And so what they sought out to look at was, does learning one's genetic risk alter one's actual risk by making people more likely to exhibit the change that they think is related to their genes? So what they did was they told people that they were genetically at risk or protected for obesity due to either poor exercise capacity or due to physiological satiety. So they measured both. So they were looking at satiety, they were looking at exercise capacity. What they found was, depending on what they told them, this information changed their cardiorespiratory physiology, it changed their perceived exertion, it changed endurance and perceived fullness after food consumption. So this is an actual graph here of what was going on. Some of these things are pretty incredible. Like, there was a change in the amount of time, the total run time, the change in the time to when the test felt hard. There was a change in time to when they felt hot. Like, when you're working out and you're sweating, your body temperature is increasing. When you feel that, there was a change in time in how ventilated and their CO2 exchange. So that's pretty incredible that they saw physiological metrics, things that they could actually measure, what happened between that. So when you see on the left, it says they were told that they were high risk, and on the right, they was told that they were protected. And when they're told that they were high risk, we saw a negative change in CO2 exchange, a positive change when they were told that they were protected. Or you look at total run time. When they told that they were high risk for poor cardiorespiratory fitness, you saw a decrease in total run time. When they told us protected, we saw an increase. So again, I think this is pretty cool stuff. This one is related to GLP. GLP, is very hot right now. A lot of the medications that are for weight loss are targeting GLP. GLP is involved with satiety. In fact, here at Nimbus, that we do compounded GLP prescriptions for people who are interested in weight loss. But they looked at a change in this marker for satiety. And when they told that they were high risk for poor satiety after meals, that they looked at that change in GLP compared to when they were told they were protective. And so you saw a increase in the group that was told that they were protective for a GLP release. So it changed their physiology. It changed the amount of GLP release in these subjects. And then if you look fullness, the people who were told they were high risk for poor satiety after eating, they saw a decrease in fullness. When they told they were protective, they saw an increase in fullness, an increase in satiety. So these are some really interesting studies. They really outline how our mindset is so important in how we, our physiology, and it shows that how we think about our world and think about our actions can help dictate the outcomes of those actions. And so that's why when you look at the PDF that we have, the download this PDF channel, the first thing we talk about is mindset. And it's really honing in on your mindset and how you think about the things that you're doing on a daily basis, because it's extraordinarily important for your overall health. So these are some of the studies out there. These are why placebo and belief effects are powerful, why your mindset is so powerful. It changes your physiology in ways that we're still learning and understanding. This is why you need placebo-controlled trial. If someone out there says that X, Y, or Z supplement or device or whatever is beneficial, and there hasn't been a placebo-controlled trial, that we really don't know. Then you may just be buying an expensive placebo or belief effect. And like I said earlier, if it's cheap and it's low risk, then that might be okay. But a lot of things, as far as like supplements and things like that, they have risks. So that's why it's always important to use those sources that we talked about last time, like examine.com, Consensus, a natural medicines database to evaluate these therapies. And you can even go to PubMed or Google and look for human randomized controlled trials and look at what that evidence shows. So this has been our talk on placebo and belief effects. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. Okay. Anybody have any questions, any comments? I'm going to invite you guys to come on the stage and see if you have anything to say or add to the conversation.
I thought this was a very awesome, very interesting finding. Mindset and has always been, I think people don't really understand that, how your mindset can change anything. Because I've been around people, like you said, who have cancer and this, and some of them just beat it so well because they have had such a positive mindset about it. Whereas some just kind of sit in it and don't last very long. I've had quite a few family members like that. But I'm very interested in this, especially the weight loss thing, because it's something that I've been, most women battle with, not even just men, women, but anyway, I think this is an awesome thing that people don't really understand about how the mindset can change many, many aspects of your life.
Thank you guys. I appreciate you coming up here and talking on the stage. So, all right. Well, that was about 20 something minutes. So that's perfect. You guys back your evening. Hope you guys have a very blessed evening. If you're watching the replay, thank you. And the notes will be, or the link to the replay will be in the town hall replay. Sir. So, all right. Have a blessed evening.